They told me to stop dreaming, said I was wasting my time, that I needed to grow up, be realistic, and get a real job. I was 19 when I first heard those words from my parents, Janice and Warren, spoken not with concern, but with that sharp-edged judgment only parents can deliver when they think they're right. The kind of tone that sounds like they've already written your failure into your future and expect you to thank them for it. My name is Tyler. I'm 31 now. But back then, I was just a skinny kid with too many ideas, a beat-up Dell laptop, and a dream I couldn't shut up about. I didn't want to go to college, not in the traditional sense. I wanted to build something. I didn't know exactly what, just that it would be mine and that it would live online. Websites, apps, tools, whatever. I was obsessed with digital infrastructure, even if I didn't yet have the words for it. I still remember the night the whole thing came crashing down. The last time I ever felt truly supported by my family. It was after dinner, and I'd cleared the plates, as usual. My younger brother Evan was home from his second year at university, studying finance like a good little soldier. Dad had CNN on, volume low. Mom was scrolling Zillow like it was her religion. I brought up the prototype I'd been working on for weeks, something I thought might actually be viable. A platform for freelance developers to team up on short-term SaaS projects. A sort of collaborative GitHub meets Upwork. I'd even come up with a name, Code Hive. Is this another one of your schemes? My dad asked, not even looking up from his recliner. It's not a scheme, I said. It's a platform. I'm trying to build something scalable. There's a real demand for this. I already have some guys on Reddit testing it out. If I can just get a little funding, like $5,000, I can push the beta out next month. Mom made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but definitely wasn't neutral. $5,000. Tyler, you work part-time at a coffee shop. That's not a business. That's a hobby. You need to grow up. I swallowed hard. I just need a little runway. I'm asking if you'd consider loaning me the money. Just a loan. I'll pay you back within the year. My brother smirked. Maybe if you spent less time dreaming and more time doing, you wouldn't need to beg. Evan, I said, trying to keep calm. I've put in 300 hours building this. I'm not begging. I'm pitching. The same way you'll be pitching banks for capital when you graduate. That's different, he said. I'll be working in finance. You're chasing some fantasy. And then Mom laid down the hammer. We're not investing in your delusions, Tyler. You're not Steve Jobs. You're not special. We raised you to be realistic, not reckless. That stung. Not because I believed I was some tech prodigy, but because I thought, deep down, I mattered enough for them to believe in me. Or at least pretend to. They said no, of course. Dad gave me a long lecture about financial responsibility, then pivoted to how I needed to man up and move out if I wasn't going to follow a normal path. Evan chimed in with some passive-aggressive nonsense about how he could probably get an internship at Goldman Sachs to bail me out later if I failed. Mom just sighed like I was giving her a migraine and disappeared upstairs. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I just nodded, got up, and went back to my room. That night, I emailed my landlord and asked if the basement unit was still available. He gave me a deal on rent since it had a mold problem and 0 windows, but I took it. I packed my things, moved out 3 days later, and never looked back. Over the next few years, I worked. And I mean worked. 10, 12, sometimes 15 hours a day. I juggled freelance gigs to keep the lights on, survived on instant ramen and black coffee, and slowly but surely turned Code Hive from a janky prototype into a functioning platform. I taught myself proper backend engineering, hired 2 part-time devs from Brazil, and started getting real traction on Hacker News and Product Hunt. The app was buggy. The UI sucked. But it worked. And more importantly, people were using it. Meanwhile, my family acted like I had disappeared. Birthdays? Ignored. Holidays? Skipped. If I texted, I got a thumbs-up emoji from Evan or a one-word reply from Mom. I wasn't welcome at the table anymore. I'd embarrassed them, I guess. Failed to follow the script. But I didn't care. Not as much as I thought I would. Their silence fueled me more than their support ever did. By the time I hit 26, Code Hive had enough revenue to quit all my freelance work. I registered it as an LLC, brought on a real CTO, partnered with a small firm in Toronto for seed capital. We expanded, rebranded, cleaned up the UX. I paid off all my debts, moved into a downtown loft, and bought my first car, a used Tesla, because I wanted something quiet and fast. I still wasn't rich, not really. But for the first time, I had margin, security, control. And then came the call. It was my mom. I remember seeing her name on my phone and just staring at it for a full 10 seconds before answering. "Tyler," she said too brightly. "It's been a while." "Yeah," I replied flatly. "It has." There was a pause. Then she launched into it. How things were complicated right now. How the mortgage rates had ballooned. How Dad's retirement savings had taken a hit. How the house, the same house I grew up in, the same house they'd kicked me out of, was at risk of foreclosure. And finally, the ask. "We were wondering," she said, voice soft and sugar-coated, "if you might be willing to help out. Just a little. Just until we can stabilize things." I didn't answer right away. My mind was a storm of emotions. Rage, vindication, sadness, a weird, aching nostalgia. I imagined the kitchen, the worn wooden cabinets, the smell of Mom's overcooked lasagna. I imagined being 19 again, sitting at that table, asking them for $5,000. Just $5,000. I hadn't even asked them to believe in me. I'd asked them to bet on me. And they hadn't just said no. They'd laughed, mocked, dismissed me like I was a child waving a crayon drawing in front of a boardroom. So yeah, I took a deep breath. And I said the only thing I could say. "I'll think about it." And then I hung up. But of course, I already knew what I was going to do. I wasn't going to send them money. I was going to send them a message. One they'd never forget. And I had the perfect idea. But I'll tell you about that part soon. Because before I show you what I did, you need to know how bad things really got. How my parents started playing victim. How Evan got involved. How things spiraled into full-blown manipulation and guilt trips. How they tried to tear down what I'd built, again. And how, this time, I was ready for them. Ready to watch them fall apart under the weight of their own entitlement. Ready for revenge. I didn't hear from them again for about a month. After that first call, after I said I'd think about it, they must have assumed I was caving. That the years of distance had softened me. That maybe, just maybe, I was still the people-pleasing kid they'd raised to nod along and stay in line. They were wrong. But I didn't tell them that. Not yet. I let the silence simmer, gave them time to stew in uncertainty. I wanted them to reach out again, not because I needed more groveling, though I won't lie, it was satisfying, but because I knew them. My parents didn't ask for help unless they were desperate. And desperation always makes people show their true selves. Sure enough, it didn't take long before I got the second call. This time, it was my dad. I was eating lunch when his name popped up. I let it ring twice, then picked up, keeping my voice neutral. "Hey, Tyler, glad you picked up." His voice was tight, less friendly this time. Like calling me was a task on his to-do list he just wanted to cross off. I wanted to follow up on our last conversation. "Okay, I take it you've had time to think." "I have. And I'm still thinking." That silence that followed was the same kind of silence I used to get when I brought home a B on a math test. Not angry, just disappointed, calculating, like he was trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong raising me. "Tyler," he said finally, "this is your family we're talking about." "Yeah, I know. We're not asking for a handout. Just a bridge. We've done a lot for you over the years. Paid for your school, roof over your head, food on the table. I paid rent the moment I turned 18. I reminded him. "You made me sign a contract, remember? That was to teach you responsibility, right? And I learned it. So responsibly, I'm thinking about it." He exhaled hard. "We don't have time for games. I'm not playing." Click. He hung up. And for a while, that was that. But the real breaking point didn't come from that call, or the one after, or even the surprise visit that happened a week later when my mom showed up at my office unannounced with homemade banana bread and a voice trembling with forced sweetness. No, the real turning point came when I found out what they told Evan. It was late spring when my brother finally reached out, texted me out of the blue. "Yo, you got a sec?" I stared at it for a long moment. Evan and I had never been close. He'd always been the golden boy, charming, clean-cut, obedient. Did everything by the book. Honors classes, football, finance degree, internships, LinkedIn posts about growth mindset and value creation. The kind of guy who said things like, "circle back," in casual conversation. But I replied, "Sure. Need to talk. Call." I called him. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey," he said. "Listen, I didn't want to get in the middle of all this, but Mom and Dad are seriously stressed. They're not telling you everything." No kidding. They're months behind on payments. Dad cashed out part of his IRA just to cover property taxes, and Mom's been skipping her prescriptions to save cash. I didn't respond. I just let the silence hang. I know you've got your thing going, he continued. Your little app or whatever. But they're drowning, man. And they won't say it. But I know they're hoping you'll step in. I was quiet for a second. Why do you think they won't just ask you? They did, he admitted. But I told them I couldn't. Not until my promotion goes through. Plus I've got my own stuff. My condo, my car lease. Right. There was a beat. Then he added, they said you're doing well. Like, really well. I said nothing. Look, I get it. You've got history. But they're our parents. Our parents, I repeated. Yeah. And where were they when I needed $5,000? That was different. How? You were chasing a dream. This is real life. That was it. That was the line. That smug, dismissive tone. This is real life. That was always the difference between me and Evan. He played by the rules. I didn't. And in their eyes, that made him the adult. Me? I was the cautionary tale. The one who needed to wake up. But what he said next, that's what broke something in me. I just think it'd be really messed up if they lost the house while their millionaire son sits on his hands. I blinked. What did you just say? Look, man, I didn't mean millionaire. There was a pause. I mean, they said you were doing great. Mom mentioned your downtown place. The Tesla. She said you've got investors and a full team now. Figured you'd done well for yourself. That's when it clicked. They'd gone digging. Maybe Googled the company name. Maybe saw the press release from when we closed our second round. They knew. They'd figured out I was no longer some kid in a basement building a glitchy platform. They knew I had money now. Stability. Leverage. But it wasn't just that. It was the way Evan said it. Millionaire son. Like I was an ATM with a pulse. I ended the call quickly after that. Said I had another meeting. Told him I'd think about it. Again. But my brain was on fire. Because later that night, I checked my LinkedIn, an account I barely touched, and saw that Evan had viewed my profile. So had my mom. So had one of her friends from church. So had my old high school principal. And that's when I knew. They were gossiping. They were passing me around like a success story they had helped create. Like I was proof of their great parenting. Like my story was a chapter in their book. I wasn't a person to them. I was a product. And it only got worse. A week later, I got an email from my old high school's alumni association. They wanted to invite me to speak at an upcoming fundraiser. Apparently, my mom had nominated me as an entrepreneurial success story. Said I overcame hardship with resilience and credited his strong upbringing for his work ethic. Strong upbringing? I nearly threw my laptop across the room. But nothing compared to what happened next. The betrayal that flipped everything upside down. It came on a rainy Tuesday. I was in a Zoom call when my phone started blowing up. Emails, notifications, texts. At first, I thought something had happened to one of our servers. But then I saw the subject line. Family in need. Help save the Thompson home. They'd started a GoFundMe. Not just a GoFundMe, but a full campaign. With photos of the house, a dramatic write-up about medical issues, job market downturn, and unexpected financial burdens. My mom had written it like a novel, full of half-truths and manipulative language. There was even a paragraph that read, "We've always believed in our children and done our best to support them. One of our sons has been incredibly fortunate in business, but unfortunately, he has chosen not to assist us during this difficult time. We are hoping our community can step in where family has failed." Where family has failed. I sat there, reading those words over and over, feeling something sharp and cold take root in my chest. Not anger. Not even sadness. Something deeper. Something final. They didn't just want my help. They wanted my reputation. They wanted to cast themselves as noble, suffering parents abandoned by their ungrateful tech bro son. And the worst part? The post was getting shared. Donations were coming in. Comments from strangers calling me heartless, selfish, disconnected from reality. They made me the villain in their sob story. And Evan? He donated $1,000. Publicly. With a comment that read, "Wish I could do more. Love you, Mom and Dad." I closed the tab. Sat still for a full hour. And then I made a plan. Not just to protect myself. Not just to get even. But to make sure they never did this to me or anyone else again. But we'll get there. Because before I could act, they pulled one final move. A move so calculated, so cold, it made everything before it look like child's play. And that's where things really got interesting. I'd always thought the worst thing my parents could do to me was ignore me. Dismiss my ideas, treat me like a disappointment, a cautionary tale. I was wrong. The worst thing they ever did was pretend they raised me right only after I became valuable. After the GoFundMe post went semi-viral in our small hometown, everything changed. The house I grew up in became a digital monument to their suffering, and I became the villain. The comments were brutal. People from our old church called me a disgrace. A couple of former classmates even DM'd me to say they'd always known I was arrogant. One girl I barely remembered sent me a screenshot of the post with the message, "Wow, hope your Tesla's comfy." It wasn't the shame that got to me, though. It was the betrayal. The realization that even success, especially success, didn't earn me respect in their eyes. It only made me a resource, a gold mine to be guilt, squeezed, and leveraged. And it didn't stop with the fundraiser. 1 week later, I received an envelope at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single page, neatly folded. No note, no greeting, just a copy of the deed to the house I grew up in, highlighted to show the overdue balance and foreclosure proceedings. At the bottom, someone had written in blue pen, "Still thinking about it." That was when I cracked. Not in some dramatic way. No screaming, no shattered glass. I just sat on my couch, holding that paper, and felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, not even disbelief. Just cold, quiet detachment. I remember getting up, walking to the bathroom mirror, and staring at my reflection for a long time. I looked older than I felt. Tired. Not from work, but from the weight of carrying this invisible war with people who were supposed to love me. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the folder on my hard drive labeled Personal. It was buried under layers of work documents. Inside were old photos. Me at 17, coding in the garage, sitting on milk crates and surrounded by sticky notes. One shot had my prototype sketch taped to the wall behind me. Code High version 1.0 dream. Build. Share. I smiled just a little. That version of me had hope. Hunger. But also this raw kind of belief that if I built something good enough, I'd finally be enough. For them. For the world. For myself. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark until the city lights dimmed outside. That night, I deactivated every one of my personal social media accounts. LinkedIn, Instagram, even Reddit. I sent my PR agency a memo to pause all press and partnerships for 30 days. I told my assistant to cancel all speaking requests, podcasts, and interviews. And then I disappeared. Not from the world, just from theirs. I needed to rebuild. Not my business. Me. For the next few months, I pulled back from the hustle. Delegated more. Started going on walks without my phone. Meditated in the morning. Took weekend trips, solo. Paris, Kyoto, even a cabin in northern Alberta where there was no signal and no one who knew who I was. At first, I felt twitchy. Like I was falling behind. Like the world would forget me if I stopped feeding it. But something strange happened. I began to feel okay. Then, better than okay. I started journaling. Not with some polished leather-bound book, just a cheap spiral notebook from the airport. I wrote down every time I felt like I wasn't enough. Every time I heard my mom's voice in my head telling me to grow up. Every time I pictured my dad's eyes rolling while I talked about APIs and server load balancing. And eventually, those voices started to fade. They weren't mine. Not really. Just echoes I'd been carrying. I reread old emails I'd sent to VCs, filled with nervous hope. Looked at old GitHub commits with silly comments like, please work, please work, please. I remembered the long nights alone in that moldy basement, the smell of instant noodles, the glow of the screen, the dream that refused to die. And slowly, I started to feel something dangerous. Pride. Not in the money. Not in the headlines. In me. The boy who never stopped believing. The man who built something from nothing. And that man, he didn't know anyone anything. 3 months into my digital detox, I got a call. It was from Nadine, my lawyer and friend. She handled most of my contracts, equity issues, and the occasional annoying cease and desist from startup copycats. You're not going to believe this, she said. Try me. Your parents are trying to trademark the name Code Hive. I actually laughed. What? Yup. Filed it last week through a Shell LLC registered to an Evan Thompson. Same address as your parents. They're trying to claim it's a family legacy brand. I felt the blood drain from my face. Nadine continued. I've already filed an injunction and a response. It'll get shut down, but, Tyler, this isn't about money anymore. They're trying to take credit for your identity. That hit harder than I expected. Because she was right. They weren't content with my silence. They wanted my legacy, wanted to rewrite the story, their story. So I flew home. Not to visit, not to talk, to see. It had been nearly 6 years since I last walked those streets. Everything felt smaller, grayer. The town square now had a cheap coffee chain where my favorite old bookstore used to be. The local newsstand was gone. The library had a busted roof and brown grass. But their house? Still standing. Barely. The lawn was overgrown. Paint peeling. A foreclosure notice taped crookedly to the mailbox. And the SUV in the driveway? Still had the proud parent of an honor student bumper sticker. That part almost made me laugh. I parked down the street. Just stared at the house. No one came out. No movement. Just the soft sway of broken blinds in the upstairs window. I didn't knock. Didn't text. I just stood there until the sun dipped low enough to cast the whole house in shadow. And then I walked away. Because I didn't need anything from them anymore. Not approval. Not closure. Not even an apology. But I was going to respond. On my terms. And the timing couldn't have been better. Just 2 weeks later, we finalized a massive acquisition deal. A European tech conglomerate wanted Code Hive. Not just the platform, but the talent, the pipeline, the infrastructure. We weren't selling out. We were expanding. I retained full creative control, equity, and was named Chief Innovation Officer of their U.S. branch. It was everything I'd worked for. And more. I celebrated with my team. Flew my developers in from Sao Paulo and Warsaw. Rented a beach house for a week. We drank champagne at sunset, played poker until 3 a.m., and toasted to the weird little app that could. They were my family now. The ones who believed in the vision when it was just duct tape and ambition. But I wasn't done yet. Because there was still the card. A simple idea. A final message. Not angry. Not cruel. Just clear. I didn't want revenge in the form of lawsuits or public humiliation. I wanted a moment. A message they'd read and remember every time they saw my name online. Every time someone said, "Hey, isn't your son that entrepreneur?" So I wrote it. Handwritten. Clean. No logo. No company seal. Just a single sentence, written on crisp white stationery. If only you'd invested in me like I asked. Oh well. And I enclosed it in a standard Hallmark card that said, "Thinking of you," in soft blue cursive. I didn't include a check. No return address. Just mailed it to the house. Then I went back to work. Because this wasn't about burning bridges anymore. It was about building something better. Something bigger. Something that didn't need their name on it. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. Because they weren't done. And when they finally realized what the card meant, what it symbolized, that's when they made their final move. A move so desperate, so shameless, it forced me to make the one decision I'd been avoiding for years. The card landed like a thunderclap. I didn't hear anything for a week. Then 2. Then almost a full month. Total silence. No calls. No texts. No dramatic Facebook posts or guilt-tripping voicemails. For a while, I actually wondered if they'd finally gotten the message, finally realized that whatever version of me they thought they could manipulate was gone. But I should have known better. Because my parents weren't the type to go quiet unless they were planning something. It started with a voicemail from Evan. Just his voice, tight and flat. Really classy, man. Real mature. You think you're so clever? Fine. Just remember you started this. Then came the letters. One was from a lawyer in our hometown, claiming my parents had co-signed a small loan for educational expenses in my name back in 2013. They were demanding repayment. It was complete nonsense, fabricated, baseless, and easily disproved by my accountant. But it was annoying. Another came from the church, if you can believe that. A handwritten letter from Pastor Dale, expressing his disappointment in how I had abandoned the values I was raised with. Told me I should consider donating to help the congregation's youth program in the spirit of healing. Healing. They wanted to heal with my money. And the last straw? The feature in the local newspaper. It was a small-town publication. Circulation maybe 3,000 readers. But the headline stuck with me like a splinter. Empty nest, full regret. Parents of a tech millionaire face foreclosure while son lives in luxury. The article was loaded with emotional bait. Stock photos of sad old houses. Quotes from my mother about sleepless nights and how success changes people. They never mentioned me by name, but they didn't have to. Everyone in that town knew who they were talking about. The kicker? They tried to claim they'd inspired Code Hive. That my childhood garage tinkering was nurtured by my dad's mechanical know-how and my mom's resourceful homemaking. It was such a blatant PR stunt that even I couldn't believe how low they'd gone. But I didn't get mad. Not this time. Because by now, I wasn't the same person who once begged them to believe in me. I was smarter, stronger, sharper, and I had something they didn't. Leverage. They'd shown their hand. Overplayed it, even. And now they'd handed me the perfect opportunity to do what I should have done years ago. Finish this. But not with noise. With strategy. So I made a plan. It started small. Step 1. Gather intel. I hired a local private investigator. Her name was Sasha. Sharp as a whip and twice as mean. I told her I needed everything. Financials, connections, recent transactions, even church donations. If they were moving money, hiding assets, or manipulating anyone else, I wanted to know. Sasha got to work immediately. Step 2. Restructure my online presence. I had my PR agency remove or redact every single reference to my hometown in past interviews, bios, and press kits. No more origin stories. No more started in a garage. I didn't want them being able to point to anything and say that's about us. I also locked down my personal LinkedIn and transitioned it to a corporate-only profile. No personal details. No birthdays. No alma mater. Just business. Step 3. Rebuild the narrative. I reached out to a few journalist friends. Quietly. Told them I wanted to do a long-form piece about modern entrepreneurship, about building from nothing, about surviving without family support, about what it means to come from nothing real. The kind of story that reclaims the narrative without ever having to name names. They were thrilled. Said it was timely, raw, exactly what people need to hear right now. I didn't do it for the clout. I did it for control. Step 4. Prepare the trap. Sasha delivered her report 2 weeks later. Turns out, my parents weren't as broke as they claimed. The house. Yes, in foreclosure. But they had 3 other properties in various states of rental. 2 in town, 1 out of state. All owned under a different LLC registered to, drumroll, Evan. They'd been funneling rent money through shell accounts while crying poor in public. The GoFundMe? Over $40,000 raised. And where did most of it go? Not to medical bills. Not to prescriptions. They'd bought a new boat. A goddamn boat. I scrolled through Sasha's photos, mouth dry. My parents, lounging on the deck, holding wine glasses like they were in a magazine ad. Evan steering like he was captaining a yacht instead of a pontoon. I closed the file. That was it. That was all I needed. Because now I had proof. Proof of deception. Proof of fraud. And, most importantly, proof that they were building their own version of my success off the backs of people they manipulated. But I wasn't going to expose them yet. No, first I needed to lay the perfect bait. It came in the form of an opportunity. See, what I didn't mention earlier is that the company acquiring Code Hive. They were planning a massive public launch in the US. And they wanted to host a gala. Black tie, press, founders, influencers, investors, the works. And guess who they asked to be the keynote speaker? Yours truly. The event was scheduled in Los Angeles. But I had an idea. I called the CEO personally. Would you be open to hosting it somewhere less obvious? He paused. What did you have in mind? How about a full circle moment? A redemption story. We do it in my hometown. He chuckled. You sure about that? I smiled. Very. We booked the convention center. Rented out the entire building. Sent out invitations. Flew in media teams. I even arranged a local scholarship for high school students pursuing tech, quietly, under a different name. And then I did something bold. I sent my parents an invitation. Not as guests. As honorees. I told them the company wanted to celebrate the people who shaped me. Told them we were donating in their name. Flattered them. Made it sound like their public redemption arc was finally here. Evan responded within 3 hours. Said it was about time. Asked if there would be press. I replied that there'd be plenty. The night of the gala arrived like thunderclouds before a storm. Flashy lights. Champagne towers. Designer suits. We packed the hall with founders, developers, journalists, and investors. Everyone buzzing about the future of innovation. My parents showed up 30 minutes early. My mom wore a navy blue dress with silver earrings. My dad wore a suit that didn't quite fit. Evan trailed behind them like a smug chaperone. I greeted them with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Glad you could make it, I said. You look good, my mom said, scanning the room. All this is for you. It's for the story, I said. What story? You'll see. They didn't know it, but every camera in that room was about to capture the moment I told the truth. Not their version. Not the fairy tale. The real story. But before that could happen, something else happened. Something I didn't see coming. Something that changed the game again. Because just before I walked up to the stage, my assistant rushed up to me, pale-faced and wide-eyed. "You need to see this," she whispered, holding up her phone. It was a link, a live one, to a brand new video, posted that day. The title? "My son is a tech millionaire, and he's trying to erase us." And the thumbnail? A weepy close-up of my mother, microphone in her hand, sitting in the church basement, of all places, giving a testimony. I hit play, and what I heard made my blood run cold. I stood there, frozen. My assistant's phone trembled slightly in her hand as I listened to the video, the noise of the gala fading into a blur around me. The screen showed my mother, Janice Thompson, seated on a folding chair in the church basement, surrounded by an audience of maybe 20 people, including Pastor Dale, a few elderly couples, and a woman I vaguely recognized as my 8th grade science teacher. She had a tissue in her hand, though there weren't any actual tears. Her voice, however, was thick with practiced tremble. "We did everything for that boy," she said into the microphone. "Sacrificed our own retirement to give him a stable home. And now that he's a millionaire, he's embarrassed by us. He cut us off. Won't even call. He's rewriting history, telling people we were cruel, that we never supported him. And now he's throwing this big party in town, and, well, I guess we're not even invited." She sniffed. "I don't want money. I just want my son back." Applause followed. Sympathy. Murmurs. Then the camera panned to Evan standing in the back, arms folded, lips pursed like he was some stoic martyr. And then it hit me. The timing. This wasn't just a performance. This was premeditated. They posted it right before the gala, hoping it would spread before my keynote, hoping the press would pick it up, hoping I'd be forced into damage control. They were trying to corner me. One last time. They wanted to make me the villain of my own celebration. I exhaled slowly. The old me might have canceled the speech, might have panicked, might have walked out the back door and disappeared again. But not this me. Not after everything. I handed my assistant the phone and walked to the stage. The lights dimmed. The chatter settled. The audience turned to face the main stage, where I stood in a fitted black suit and no tie. Just a mic clipped to my lapel and a screen behind me displaying the Code Hive logo in soft, animated white. I began slowly. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here." Polite applause. "I wasn't sure I'd ever speak publicly about this," I continued. "But I've learned something over the past year. When you build something from scratch, everyone wants to claim a piece of it, especially the ones who never picked up a hammer." A few people chuckled, unsure if it was meant to be funny. "I'd like to tell you a story." And so I did. I told them everything. But not as a rant. Not as a hit piece. As a narrative. I spoke about being 19. About being laughed at for having a dream. About being told to grow up, to get real. About asking for a small loan and being told I wasn't special. I painted the picture without embellishment. Just the raw truth. I watched as some of the audience leaned forward, others nodding along. A few journalists began scribbling furiously in their notebooks. I didn't name my parents. Didn't have to. They told me I was delusional, I said. That I was a failure. I moved out 3 days later, with nothing but a beat-up laptop and $200 to my name. Then I shifted. But I kept building. Through ramen dinners and moldy basements and months of working freelance jobs just to afford internet access. And eventually, I launched something. Something small. Then bigger. Then global. The room swelled with applause. And then I paused. Let the room fall silent again. But success doesn't silence people. It amplifies them. Suddenly, people who never believed in you try to take credit. Rewrite the story. Claim they were behind you all along. The screen behind me changed. Photo evidence. Screenshots of the GoFundMe. Snippets from Sasha's report showing LLC registrations, rental properties, the boat purchase. Even a clip from the video they just posted that day. I want to be clear, I said, voice steady. This is not revenge. This is clarity. This is the truth on the record. Because people will lie. People will exploit. But I have always believed that truth, when told clearly enough, stands on its own. The audience was dead silent. Then, as the final screen faded to black, I added, and if you're wondering why I invited a few specific guests tonight, a spotlight swung to the side of the room, illuminating a table near the back. My parents. My brother. Caught mid-drink. staring up at me like deer in headlights. It's because I wanted them to hear this with everyone else. Gasps, murmurs, phones raised, people whispering. My mom's face turned the color of chalk. My dad looked like someone had just slapped him. Evan, of course, just glared. I smiled. I've spent most of my life chasing validation, trying to be enough. But I realized, finally, that being enough doesn't come from being recognized. It comes from being unshakable. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Some people clapping so hard it echoed off the ceiling. Others cheering. A few journalists already live tweeting the entire thing. I nodded once, then stepped off the stage and walked straight past their table. My mom reached for me as I passed. Tyler, wait. I paused, turned slowly, leaned down, and whispered loud enough for just them to hear. You made your choice. This was mine. Then I kept walking. The fallout was immediate. The clip of my speech went viral within 24 hours. Not just on tech blogs, but across mainstream media. Headlines praised the tech entrepreneur who told the truth. Commentators called it the most satisfying moment in startup history. Some even called it corporate revenge done right. The GoFundMe was flagged for fraud and frozen. The boat, repossessed. The rental properties, investigated for tax violations. Turns out, when you lie to the IRS and the internet at the same time, karma moves fast. My brother tried to do damage control on social media, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, but no one bought it. His employer quietly terminated his contract less than a week later. As for my parents, they sold the house. Quietly. Moved 2 states over. No announcement. No goodbye. I haven't heard from them since. But sometimes I Google their names. Just to check. No updates. No fundraisers. Just silence. And me? I kept building. Code Hive is now in 5 countries. We launched a fellowship for underprivileged coders. I bought a house overlooking the ocean. Not because I needed it, but because it reminds me every day that I built this. Not in spite of what they did to me. Because of it. Not out of spite, but from resolve. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting ties, if I wish things had gone differently. And I tell them this. You don't owe anyone the story they wanted. You owe yourself the ending you deserve. And this was mine.